Good evening. So, as you know, as is my habit, I've listened. I always do it. I listen to my own videos. I mean, mostly the ones that I've recorded in the. I mean, in the very recently. Just because I do not. I almost never plan whatever I'm going to say. I mean, there are exceptions, like fairy tales. That is, of course. I mean, like I thought about it like 2 years ago, and so I mean it's already in my mind. So, but I mean, and there are some other exceptions. But generally, I speak like from the mind, like not without preparation. So it's just much easier because if you start to kind of to plan, I mean, it's like writing, which is also something that I like to do, especially in the past. But I mean, it results in a significantly different kind of artifacts. I mean, that are much more. It takes much longer to prepare it, and also it's much more metaphorical, which is something. Sometimes it's nice. It's nice. I mean, I have I really like literature and even and not only not all literary theory, but it's not really the best kind of I would say medium in order to, if you want to to just send or convey very simple and straightforward messages to people not necessarily because people are stupid, even though most of them of course are stupid, but I mean more so it's just that they don't have mostly they don't have patience. Even if they are smart, they don't have patience. They want it very very simple, so and short. So I sometimes there's something I've said it in the past. I'll say it again. That it's kind of me and God, we have we have different kind of preferences with regards to the question of what is better, the Old Testament or the New Testament? Because I prefer the Old Testament, but God prefers the New Testament. Really, so we can ask why. So the answer is that the Old Testament was written by intellectuals, mostly for intellectual audiences. Mostly, not only, but mostly. Yeah, of course, many parts of Genesis were written, based on, of course, already very known, mythologies, and they were not aimed, specifically for intellectual. But most of the Old Testament was written by people that, were, evidently intellectual. Sometimes, even extremely intellectual, like the book of Ezekiel or the book of Job or things like that are really, they were always. They were always far above. The abilities of the mental faculties are and the required kind of education of the almost everyone in the population. It's still true today, but it was true when they were written, and it was always true that they were written to begin with for people that have a very highly intellectual and highly educated that even today are almost nowhere to be found, and certainly when they were written it was almost they were almost did not exist. But of course they had their place. It's kind of and Jews. And I was educated, as just a Jew, and Orthodox Jew, and Jews always like very complicated texts because they like to speak about them forever, and analyze them forever. So, but the New Testament was something completely different. In any kind of aspect, and some of it might be lost in translation because if you read it in both in English, for example, maybe you don't I don't know if you can feel the difference. But they were written in a completely different language. Even of course, the Old Testament mostly was written in Hebrew. Almost all of it. Small parts in Aramaic, Aramaic, but mostly almost all in Hebrew. And the New Testament was written in Koine, which is kind of a popular Greek, but Greek, but of low Greek of the people, not the Greek of Homer or I don't know, or Euripides. But a Greek that was of people that were not very very educated. So it's completely different kind of and I should say but it didn't say not just Hebrew but literary Hebrew. Hebrew. It's complicated because, you know, I mean, it was written throughout a long time, and I mean, you can see like various like stages of the development of Hebrew, like within the Bible. But mostly, I mean, it was written like, I mean, to begin with, like, I mean, using all sorts of like, I mean, complicated forms in order for the text to have like poetic merit. So it's very different. Like, I mean, and the New Testament was written, I mean, like, I mean, intentionally in a very simple way, like, I mean, in a very simple like Greek. And of course, the translations are also mostly very simple. I mean, there are kind of like, I mean, exceptions. One of the glaring exceptions is like, I mean, the Hebrew translation that you know, that was made, like, I mean, you know, the Delitesh translation that is kind of like, I mean, controversial because and today, I mean, it's also, I mean, today it's I mean, I mean, it says kind of, I mean, I would say it's kind of like it says it's placed beside like a more popular translation, like, I mean, with simple Hebrew, but because kind of, so because there was like a professor like more than 100 years ago that, I mean, translated like the Greek, the simple Greek New Testament to Hebrew, that but it kind of to biblical Hebrew, which might sound right, I mean, but is, first of all, it's kind of like his own invention because, I mean, it's there's a question of philosophy here, like, I mean, what's the best place, like, what's the best, I mean, you know, methodology of like how to translate like all text. But I mean, most people today agree, and I think that are perfectly right, that it's not a good translation. Like, even though I've read it like even more than once, like the Delitesh translation of the New Testament, but and some of it is nice, but I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, intentionally complicates simple language in order to kind of like make it artificially similar to the Old Testament, and it shouldn't be that way because it's a different text, and it was made for the people. It was made for so almost anyone. Like, I mean, of course, if people don't know how to read at all, and this was most of the people until very late in the history. So I mean, so it's a problem. I mean, so but I mean, and also, I mean, if they don't like, I mean, if it wasn't translated like to the vernacular, like, I mean, to you know, to the, I mean, to like the native like Latin languages of Europe, and I mean, after that also to like other languages, just kept like, you know, Greek and or Latin, I mean, which was the case until like, you know, almost until the Reformation. So yeah, it's a problem. Like, I mean, it's a problem. But I mean, and yeah, so when people, I mean, cannot like, I mean, don't have access to the text, and they depend on other, like, you know, depend on other people, which is a problem. But you know, it was the fact of life until, you know, until almost until the Reformation. But if they, I mean, if they can like read and write, like if they can read in any language at all, I mean, the New Testament was written, so I mean, so it can be translated to any language, and it's almost every person can understand it. So it's very different. It's something that's completely different. Like, I mean, in the intentions, like of like for who is like, I mean, for. So anyway, so really, it was kind of like a divergence. What I was meaning to say that, I mean, when you write, I mean, sometimes, I mean, it takes you a long time, but also the result is more complicated than what you actually intended, and sometimes it's nice, but sometimes it's just, I mean, it's redundant. So I listened to the videos of the last like last couple of days, and I want to clarify or add like a couple of notes, not related notes, but I mean, they're just related because these are issues that I spoke about during the last couple of days. So first of all, regarding the existence of life in the solar system, yes, I mean, I'm totally serious. I believe that like the all 8 planets in the, like the 8 planets of the solar system, like, I mean, and just, I mean, so we are clear. And when I say the 8, I mean the 4 big rocks next to the sun, like, you know, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and and in addition the 4 like giants, I mean, that are, you know, that are classified like either as gas giants or ice giants, which means the Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So I truly believe that they all contain life. Of course, I mean, again, don't expect like, I mean, you know, to find like zebras on Mercury, okay? I mean, when I say life, I mostly mean, but not uniquely. I mean, but as you already know, I mean, most of you now, I mean, I guess like I mean, know, or at least I suspect very strongly that, I mean, Venus contained much more than microbial life, but I mean, mostly microbial life, but still, it's life, like, I mean, and it might be, I mean, huge amount of life. I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, eventually you will find that, I mean, if you just, I mean, count, like, the mass, like, I mean, like, the mass of like, I mean, the weight, I mean, the weight, but I mean, you know, the mass of all, like, I mean, life forms, like, and you like put it on a scale. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually you would find that, I mean, the greatest amount can be found not just in Jupiter, but only, like, in the, you know, in the eye of Jupiter. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you eventually find that, I mean, only the eye contains, like, by mass more life than, I mean, every other planet, including Earth, because it's huge. I mean, so much, like, I mean, so much, like, you know. Now, so much, I mean, your space, like, I mean, you have so much material for life. Now you can say, but yeah, I mean, you know, different conditions, and, you know, gas giants, and, I mean, so I tell you two things with this regard. First, again, it was already proven in this channel. Watch his many videos that life are not only, you know, what you know, I mean, there are all sorts of, like, material life that are not carbon based and are tremendously, like, can sustain huge pressures and variety of temperatures, and, like, I mean, and so, I mean, accept that, I mean, the life is a phenomenon that is much more diverse than any of, like, most people in Earth suspected. Like, the great majority of, like, people, both laymen and scientists, like, that, I mean, addressed the issue, I mean, they were completely wrong, because they didn't understand how much, I mean, yes, some people, especially in the last couple of decades, yes, I mean, as I said, it became, like, more, I would say, like, I mean, the discourse on the matter was open, like, to more kind of, like, I mean, new kind of opinions, like, with regards to ammonia-based life form and silicon-based life forms, but mostly it was still very, very kind of a concept. Everybody was very concentrated, like, you know, in very strict definitions of life or strict boundaries for life. And this is, I mean, it's wrong by evidence. It's just not true. I mean, so you need to change your way you think. Now, another thing that is very important that should be said on the matter that I mentioned, but I mean, maybe I should, like, I mean, elaborate a little bit on the subject. The fake, like, the conspiracy regarding Venus, or I mean, the fake image of Venus, is actually interesting. And I've said it, like, several times. Maybe you remember if you watch, like, if you watch this channel. That actually, I mean, the fake image of Venus in itself, it's, I mean, of course, if you know that it's fake, I mean, of course, I mean, you shouldn't believe a lie. I mean, lies should not be, I mean, should be exposed. Like, I believe that the truth is very important. But I mean, just, I mean, as kind of, like, as a fictional construct, like, or, like, I mean, an experiment in science fiction, the fake image of Venus is actually very interesting. Because, I mean, I don't know who actually created it. Most certainly both the Americans and the Russians, because otherwise, I mean, I've spoken in the past that, I mean, it clearly, it was kind of, like, I mean, it was made very like, very like, I mean, in a rush, like, I mean, very quickly after, you know, during 1964, when the Venera 4 and Ranger or whatever, I mean, they met each other. I've always spoken about it in the past that, I mean, the history, like, the public history on the matter strongly suggested that, I mean, it was a conspiracy that created very hastily by both the Americans and the Russians, and they were kind of, like, I mean, in panic, and kind of, like, and it replaces another conspiracy of the Russians. Like, it was, I mean, there was already a conspiracy that, I mean, was led by the Russians, but it was replaced by another conspiracy that is more extreme, and that was clearly, I mean, generated by both, like, teams that work together, both Russians and Americans, but they did it very quickly. So, I mean, so some of the things that they did, like, I mean, they were very kind of, like, I mean, outlandish, and actually, I mean, doesn't make sense. But I mean, on other like, aspect of a conspiracy, it's I mean, it's very clear that they tried to, like, I mean, to paint, like, I mean, to create, like, a paint that, I mean, the people will be it will be difficult for people to disprove unless they send more probes. Like, they didn't, like, I mean, you know, completely create, like, a thing that it doesn't make any sense at all, like, I mean, or that can be, I mean, immediately, you know, like, I mean, disproven, like, by observation from Earth. So, I mean, some of the stuff, I mean, actually, I mean, makes sense, like, specifically regarding the gravity, and like and other measurements that actually make sense. But on others, I mean, they let themselves like, I mean, just speak completely, ridiculous stuff. Like, I mean, specifically regarding temperature and pressure. And I said it in the past, it's very easy to fake temperature because humans don't know how to calculate temperature of celestial bodies. This was true during 1960s and it's still true today. People don't know, humans do not know how to calculate like temperature. It only became like, I mean, more of an issue with the time because of the issue of global warming and the importance of models of temperature like for Earth. But you can't even calculate like, I mean, the temperature for Earth. So I mean, any kind of like temperature calculation that you have of like any celestial body that is not based on probes that actually measure it, but on calculation is, I mean, it's 100% wrong. Like, I mean, it's absolutely wrong because it's based on models that, I mean, humans cannot like don't really have the tools like the scientific tools to actually create. So yeah, I mean, you can say things like, I mean, yeah, the surface temperature of Venus is 500 Celsius, and it's kind of like insane, but humans cannot really calculate. Like, I mean, it's based presumably on probes, and I mean, unless you send more probes, and people did not send more probes since the Venera project, they did not send more probes. I mean, there was kind of like, I mean, a mapping missions that I don't know if they can't, like, I mean, if it was actually, maybe it was part of the conspiracy, or maybe I don't know what they actually did, like the mapping. Like, there is an atlas of Venus. I myself, like, I mean, as my stuff, as all my books is in storage. Like, I can't under rest, hostel, but I mean, I have storage, like, I mean, all my books. I possess, like, I mean, I have like a atlas of Venus, very, kind of like very nice atlas, and of course, it's all like, bullshit. But I mean, just fake. I mean, one big fake. So, but it's not that problem to fake such things. But the issue is that, I mean, it's you can fake temperature because, I mean, mathematically it's difficult to disprove like such, I mean, measurements. But what's interesting about like the fake model is that, and this is like the point of this kind of like, I mean, that I wanted to elaborate is that, like, I mean, so according to the theory that was very well known, the clouds of Venus actually, even though, I mean, presumably they are very toxic and, so much bullshit, like, I mean, they are made of, because, I mean, the people that actually created the conspiracy didn't want no one to actually go there. And during the 60s, it was kind of like everybody saw that, yeah, I mean, tomorrow all of us will kind of like, we'll have like vacations on the moon, and because, I mean, yeah, space cities, and, and it's going to be great, and we'll find aliens, and, because there was so much like excitement regarding space during the 60s, and everybody saw that, I mean, it's going to be, and eventually, I mean, it kind of slowed down, and mostly, I mean, since the 60s, it's mostly, I mean, mostly, truck drivers that, I mean, and I mean, sorry, I mean, they don't want to, like, I don't want, like, I mean, to look down on any astronaut, and I think it's a wonderful, like, occupation, but I mean, in the public, in the eyes of the public, mostly, I mean, since the 70s, I mean, they mostly care about it when, I mean, they die, like, I mean, when they crash, so it's kind of interesting, but I mean, other than that, they look like, like truck drivers that, I mean, endlessly, like, drives, like, crates, like, I mean, of stuff to space stations. I mean, I don't really understand why, but I mean, presumably, there should be all sorts of stuff, like, in the space station, so, I mean, astronauts, that's what they do since the 70s. They just drive, like, stuff that to do, like, to the space stations, so there will be stuff over there. Like, I mean, presumably, I mean, there is kind of like, I mean, an ongoing project for humanity, like, to put more and more stuff, like, in the space stations. So, I mean, it's noble in its own way, and I do not disrespect it, but I mean, it's just, I mean, it's very different than, I mean, what people imagined during the 1960s. Like, I mean, they imagined something completely different, like, for the near future. So, I mean, there was a thought, I mean, the people didn't want, like, to go to Venus, like, I mean, the higher ups. So they say, I mean, they depend, like, a very, extreme picture. I mean, not only with regards to, I mean, the surface temperature and surface pressure, but also regarding the clouds that are presumably very, very toxic. But during the last couple of decades, people started to think and to say, okay, but I mean, the clouds, I mean, there's a huge layer of clouds, and I mean, so it's I mean, according to their models, it couldn't be like so hot and like so much pressure like all the way. I mean, whatever you think about like what kind of like climate actually produced the presumably hellscape of 500 temperatures Celsius and 90 like atmospheres. It doesn't make any sense. But I mean, whatever model that you have, I mean, must necessitate that. I mean, it's not like that. Like the higher you get, it must be like colder. I mean, the higher you get, and also less atmospheric pressure. Of course, this is true always. I mean, it's always true in Earth, and it's true at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, because I mean, I mean, because I mean, like I mean, it must be getting colder, and because I mean, heat. I mean, whatever model that you have, like I mean, that creates such I mean high temperature on the ground, it's something to do with the fact that I mean the rays of the sun are as absorbing in the surface, and not everything reflects back. Because it's not like, you know, it can only reflect back if it kind of like, all of it, if it was like, snowball, like a complete, like, perfect snowball without atmosphere. So, I know, I don't know, like a huge diamond, like with white diamonds, and maybe, like white hole, if there is something, I don't know if it's even, like black holes or like white hole that, I mean, reflects everything back. Like, only that, I mean, but it's not a white hole, even though it's pretty white, but it's not a white hole. So, so obviously, I mean, like, I mean, the lower you get, I mean, down to the surface, I mean, the hotter it is, because I mean, because the heat actually is absorbed in the whatever material it is, like or like in the lower levels, and also, I mean, almost by definition, it's true that I mean the atmosphere pressure is also getting lower with the higher you get, because there is less stuff on you. Like I mean, it's like being on the bottom of the ocean. I mean, if you're very low in the bottom of the ocean, I mean there is like a lot of stuff on you that creates the pressure. I mean, it's not a physical explanation, but it's the kind of makes sense, and it's true. Like I mean, it's very common sense, like understanding of pressure. That I mean, the lower you get, I mean, the lower you dive in the ocean, I mean, the more pressure you have. Like 90 atmospheres is about like 900 meters. It's like the pressure 900 meters below the surf. Like I mean, on the bottom of the ocean, which is extreme. Like something that I mean, of course, humans cannot stand such thing at all. I mean, only submarines can stand such pressure, and this is actually very high even for submarines. It's like something that's excruciating. Like, I mean, it's pressed you. It's like, I mean, to be pressed to the ground like with a hammer. 90 atmospheres. And of course it's not true, but I mean, in space it's zero. The pressure in space is zero. So I mean, along the way from space, like whatever you define space, because there is all sorts of things. So when does the planet ends and where space starts? But I mean, there is kind of like a place that it's space. It's like black. And there is like other places where it's presumably the planet, where it's like, I mean, the surface is presumably 90 atmospheres. So whatever model that you will choose, I mean, it must be, and that it's getting like lower, I mean, the higher you go. So people thought, I mean, and started to create models that, I mean, somewhere in the clouds, at some level in these clouds, actually, I mean, the temperature should be like above like what you mean, things that that you are used to in Earth, like 20 or 30 degrees Celsius, and also about like only something, I mean, around like 1 atmosphere. Like it doesn't need to be exactly 1 atmosphere to be comfortable for humans, because it's actually not true even in Earth. I mean, people live in all sorts of elevations and conditions, and sometimes it's not exactly 1 atmosphere. Okay, and the human body can stand a little bit of variation, but I mean, the mathematical models and also common sense necessitate that in Venus. Of course, this is all fake, but it's interesting to think about it. So I mean, it doesn't that I mean, somewhere, I mean, in the clouds, like in the level in the clouds, it will be, the condition will be, I mean, that I mean, the temperature that's like Earth, I mean, that people are used to in Earth, and also pressure that is like Earth, and gravity that is almost like that of Earth. And presumably the only problem is that it's the toxicity I mean, but this can be easily solved, with just looking, with flying like air balloons, huge zeppelins, and even such zeppelins presumably, I mean, will not be such a risk for like exploding, because it's not like if there will be a hole, you put hole in that, I mean, it all explodes, like, or that, I mean, decompresses immediately and destroys. It's like, I mean, because there is no difference in pressure between the outside and the inside of such a balloon. So even if it's kind of like there is like a tear in it, you just need to identify it in time, and you don't even need to be very quickly to do it. But I mean, and you just, I mean, it's not even that such of an emergency. There should be just, I mean, way like robots or whatever that will just be fix it. But it's not that, I mean, that the whole like balloon will decompress or explode if there is like a if it tears a little bit, because there is no difference in pressure, and it's not filled with like with the flammable like stuff. Like it's just air, presumably. So people thought about, hey, man, maybe we can actually build such flying cities in Venus. But another thing that people actually thought about, and this is actually getting very interesting, is that perhaps there is actually, if it's so convenient to humans, I mean, maybe it's also convenient to other life forms, like germs, like microbes. So why shouldn't be like, I mean, why there shouldn't, maybe there is like a ton of like life forms in the atmosphere of Venus, because presumably it's so thick. So I mean, thick, but and it maybe it contains like enough water vapor or whatever you think that is needed for life. Of course, I mean, as I say, life is actually much more diverse than everything that you thought. But people understood that. I mean, yeah, I mean, if it's so nice, I mean, maybe there's like life in it. And recently, there were actually published quite a few scientific papers that, I mean, according to all sorts of like telescopic like evidence, I mean, there is, I mean, there might be, life in the atmosphere of Venus. Now, I'm sure that there is life in the atmosphere of Venus, but there is also life in the surface of Venus. But this is the reality. But I mean, it is pretty. But I mean, from the conspiracy perspective, I mean, it's what's interesting about the story is that humans, I mean, even like inside, like, I mean, the consensus of science, I mean, without any kind of, special knowledge or, I mean, any relation to the intelligence services of the world or any knowledge of the conspiracy, just with, with the given knowledge as it is, more and more people, like, I mean, in the Earth, I mean, in the last couple of decades and certainly in the last couple of years, started to think very seriously about the possibility that the Venus as a hellscape, as you imagine it, actually contains life in the atmosphere. Now, if you accept, I mean, if you take it, I mean, as an option, like as a feasible option, that, I mean, there is like microbes in the atmosphere of a planet that is such a hellscape, presumably, I mean, the hell that presumably Venus is, with toxic clouds and like a hell of CO2 and like greenhouse like from hell, and the temperature like, I mean, like in the in the superheater of like of like steam, like power plant, and the pressure like a kilometer under the ocean. I mean, so why shouldn't we, I mean, why doesn't it make sense that there will also be life in Jupiter? Like, I mean, yeah, it's probably cold, but I mean, not all of it should be that cold, because I mean, yes, I mean, it is very far away from the sun, but there are also local factors that can contribute to relatively very high temperature. And I mean, and so I mean, why should you rule it out? I mean, if Venus, I mean, the fact that it's a rocky planet in itself is not like, I mean, a precondition for life. I mean, who said that? I mean, that it must be a rocky planet for life to exist. I don't know of any such kind of I mean, again, if you assume that, I mean, life must be, I mean, if you only speak about like intelligent life form, and you assume for some reason that all must be like humans and all should require water, so yes, I mean, you need the rocky planet because you need like, I mean, otherwise, so I mean, how can people drink the water? But why should we limit ourselves to humans, and why should we, I mean, and even why should we limit ourselves to carbon life forms? And again, I mean, if you believe that I mean, there is high probability of a ton of life form, like, I mean, variety of life forms in the atmosphere of Venus, I don't see why, I mean, you should rule out the possibility, and I would even say the necessity of life forms all over the place in Jupiter, and also Saturn, and also Neptune, and also Uranus. Of course, different types. And regarding the moons, the many moons of these giants, I mean, of course, it gives you much more. They are rocky, so it gives you all sorts of like new possibilities of even more complicated lives than bacteria. And it should be said, I mean, that, I mean, we cannot rule out the complicated life form that are bacteria in nature. I mean, this is kind of like, I mean, unorthodox thought, but it can be, I mean, theoretically it's possible. Certainly if it's in engineered life form, like the neurons. I mean, they are bacterial life forms and they have a tremendous intelligence. I mean, that's a fact. They are civilization, like much more superior to you, and they are bacterial. So I mean, so you can say, okay, but they were not evolved. But I mean, the question of origin is of less importance for me right now. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, if life is, I mean, that we discussed was evolved in natural selection, or totally like, you know, in like a guided evolution, or I mean, like, I mean, you know, ex nihilo by artificial design. It doesn't really matter for me. Like, you know, I believe in God, that God, you know, created the universe, and God and directs like everything, like, you know, in providence. But I mean, it's from scientific perspective, I don't see why it's that important. Like, I mean, to discriminate right now between, you know, like the life that was like developed presumably by, you know, Darwinian, like, you know, evolution, or life that was created, like, I mean, also like, I mean, in engineered processes. It's not that important. I mean, the important thing is that, I mean, yeah, I mean, the existence of heroes, I mean, should hint us that microbial life forms can potentially be much more complicated and even intelligent than everyone assumed. And so maybe actually, I mean, you can find amazing life forms that are even much more complicated than anyone assumed on the gas giants of the solar system. Okay, so this is with regards to life. Okay, so I'll start a new video because it's getting quite long, in which I will discuss the issue of the uplifting and the failure. I mean, the tragedy of, like, you know, what happened on Earth, like, I mean, with regards to Venusians, and why I became so pessimistic on the matter.